Hello, I'm Steph from My Driver Classic, and today I'm taking you out in a car which I think is going to win you over just as much as it has done me. It's a Hillman Super Minx Mk3. Now it's a very late one because, as you know, the Mark IV came into production in 1965. Registered in this one particular is registered in March 1965, which makes it one of the last. Anyway, if you've never watched one of these videos before, I'm going to take you for a walk around the outside, show you under the bonnet, take you inside the car and show you some of the details really close up and focus on some of the special bits and pieces, and then I'm going to take you out for a drive. If you've never seen one of these before in the flesh, I think you're going to enjoy this video immensely, and if you haven't seen one for a while, let's take a trip down memory lane. This car is sadly a much rarer sight than it should be, because even back in the mid-60s, when this was a gleaming bright penny in a row of new cars, it looked smart, attractive and quite modern. And it deserves to be far more treasured in today's lineup of classics, and hopefully today's video will have you lusting after one just as much as I now am. And for those of you watching from abroad or who are perhaps slightly younger, you may be wondering what Hillman was and where it all came from, because they haven't been around for quite some time, so you may not know too much. Now, the Hillman marque was part of the Roots group, and they also produced cars such as the Singer, the Sunbeams, the Talbots, the Commers. And at this point in time, Roots, as Britain knew it, was slowly fading because it was being taken over by Chrysler in very small chunks. And I think it's towards the end of the 60s where they do the full takeover. So I think it's about 67. Now, coming back to the car we're testing today, we are out in the Super Minx, which is not to be confused with the Minx. Now, I know I've tested a few of the Minxes, but they're not the same car. And in fact, to an observer of today, looking back, you might be wondering what the heck is going on, because they look very, very different, and yet they're very similarly named. Well, essentially, Roots needed a car to fill that tricky gap of upper mid-family car market, and they decided that the Super Minx would do just that. The team had intended for the car to completely replace the Minx, but once all was said and done, they felt like both cars served different audiences, and instead, confusing to some maybe now looking back, they kept both in the range because they both had their place and they both did sell quite well. This particular car here we're testing here today is fitted with the 1592cc engine, which is also used in the Minx. The performance isn't particularly exceptional and over the top, but it's not to be sniffed at for a modern family car of the time. It could achieve a top speed of around 80 miles per hour and do 0 to 60 in just over 21 seconds. However, if you've ever seen a Super Minx before and think that maybe I haven't got the engine size quite right, that might be because this is the last of the Super Minxes to be fitted with the 1592cc, because from the Mark IV, they then step up to the 1725cc engine, which might be familiar to you if you are a Roots fan, because they then used it for quite a few other cars within the Roots group family, long after the production of the Super Minx came to a close. On this particular Mark III, we've got the 4-speed gearbox with synchro on all forward gears. Now, you may remember from some of my Minx tests that that isn't a given on all your Minxes, so it's quite a nice step up. The one thing that I do think they missed a trick on, though, was overdrive was optional, and sadly it hasn't been fitted to this car. And the owner tells me that you do feel that when you go on a longer drive, perhaps on a motorway. The braking system is more than adequate, and the car is fitted with discs to front and drums to rear. Now, I do believe on the earlier cars they are fitted with drums all round. I'm not particularly sure though which year it changed over, but on this one it isn't drums all round. So despite being a car which I think you'll agree with me at home, still looks appealing and certainly a lot less antiquated than some of the cars of the 60s that people still absolutely rave over. It is a rare beast in the classic car world. And if you're wondering how rare, there are less than 300 left from the entire production run from 1961 to 1967. And to me, that's a massive shame. If you're wondering what happens next, the car was replaced with in the Roots lineup by the Roots Arrow cars. as probably many of you will know it, the Hillman Hunter. Although if you're watching from abroad, you may be more familiar with it as the Paycan. Now, I could talk all day about Roots cars. I absolutely adore them, and I think the cars are just so fantastic. And there's so much interesting backstories around the range and the badge engineering, but we really do need to get back to this Super Minx that we're testing here today. So if you'd like to do some more reading, a really great book that you can pick up quite cheaply is Roots Cars by David Rowe, and it's a fantastic starting point. I'm blown away with everything about this car. I've already driven it, and so I'm not going to spoil that for you just yet, but it really ticks all the boxes and it feels very modern. And here's the thing, I'm probably in a very different reviewing seat to many reviewers that come in something like this as a one-off and then leave it behind, because my friend Kev has the Hillman Minx, not the Super Minx, and I think his is the Mark III, and as I was talking to you earlier, it goes Mark III A, B, C, and this was meant to be 4, but of course they decided to go with Super Minx, and so then it jumps to 5. So I'm used to almost kind of what comes before these, and my goodness, this feels just decades ahead. That old very rounded design coming inside this, it feels a lot more upmarket, it feels a lot more executive is probably the word I would use. It's just a real treat, and to think that it's on just over 80,000 miles as well, it really does show that if you went for quality from Roots Group, it lasts even now. And that's the thing, if you look at brochures and you look at all the salesman rationale for the time, they talk about people buying into a family car that's going to last the distance, and my goodness, this certainly is. It's 2024. Anyway, let me show you what we've got inside here. So first of all, we've got this glove box which has been attractively fitted, and I'd just like to say as well that all the handles inside here are so delicate and ornate, and you might think to yourself, is that flimsy? How does it feel? Not so. They're all really sturdy despite being very elegant in their design. Opening up inside here, we have a feast for the eyes, because this is a nice little white label product. It's Roots Group Special Accessories Rocket WD-40. So essentially it's WD-40 which they buy and they just relabel for the Roots customers. But what a nice little thing to find in a glove box as you open it up. I'll show you what else I found as well. Just down on the parcel shelf, I was looking through all the literature, as I always do when anybody leaves me anything. And I was looking through this and thought, that's cool, we've got sales, we've got an accessories brochure which tells us how much things cost. I'm going to tell you how much one of my favourite things in here cost in just a minute. And then I found the original bill of sale. So you can see that there, and you can see how much was paid, and you just can't buy history like that. Stuff like that is so hard to find nowadays in cars. Anyway, I'm getting misty-eyed. Coming back to the centre here, again, this is just laid out so wonderfully and so simply. And my friend Richard is with me today, and he said it reminds me almost of a Morris Minor. Yeah, in the fact it has those little switches, but with a Morris Minor you've got that almost utilitarian dashboard where it's just that metal, whereas with this, yes, the formation of the dash is the same in that regard, however, it's all covered in chrome, in wood. It just feels very special. So let's see what we've got here. Well, you've got all your heated controls to the top with a clock in the middle. And don't you just love a clock in a car? And a well-placed clock at that, because some of the stuff that we've got in before, they've been up here, they've been over there. Nice to have it in somewhere that you can just get to quite easily. Now coming down from there, you've got this radio and this ashtray. Now I believe, looking at the accessories brochure, these were just over £27 to buy, these radios. And then I'm going to tell you one of my favourite facts that I found out today actually. So you see this ribbing here, this almost, I guess it's kind of ribbed chrome is the way I would describe it for you at home. If you're wondering where that styling comes from, it's because these radios were designed when they had the Mark 1s and the Mark 2s. However, when they get to the Mark 3, they change the dash for this wooden dash, but they don't upgrade the fascia on the radio. So this is actually, this patterning is a hangover from the earlier Super Minxes. Anyway, coming in front of us here, you've got your speedo, you've got your fuel gauge, and you've got a split dial here. So you've got your ammeter, you've got oil, and you've got your water temperature gauge as well. All as you'd expect. Now, if you're wondering what the top speed on this is, because I was telling you it was a 1600 engine, it's around 80 miles per hour. And I said to John, the owner, I said, is that realistic? And he said, because on these, so it's 4 forward speed, which I'll tell you about later on, one of the optional extras was overdrive. And by the way, if you ever get, if you look at the Scepter that I tested and it's got the overdrive, apparently you can just do a direct swap on the boxes. So people must do it. But anyway, it was an optional extra at the time, and that makes it feel more comfortable to step up beyond that 65-70 mark. But John said realistically the car's happiest when it's being cruised at around that speed, which in today's modern world with all the traffic, not really a problem. And if you're wondering, by the way, on MPG, I think it was the Motor Magazine said it was achieving 29 miles per gallon. But I said to John, do you think that's realistic? And he said, actually, he uses E5 petrol in this and he achieves around 30 miles per gallon. So to say that it's still doing that in 2024, that's quite a marvel as well. Now, coming over from there, you've got your wipers, and I believe this is the same control. I haven't been in it for a while, that Scepter. I'm sure it was the same. It's the turn, so it's single speed, and then it's the push for the wash functionality. Coming over from there, you've got your indicators on the stalk. And I guess that would be one of my very small criticisms, is that this indicator is actually slightly upwards in its natural seating position, so I keep thinking I've left the indicator on. Anyway, I'm just going to pop the key in because I want you to hear this horn. Oh, it's so nice. Have a little listen. It reminds me of, and British people of a certain age will know exactly what I'm on about, I'm sure it was a very similar horn at the start of the BBC series Play Days. Showing my age there. Now anyway, those are pretty much all our controls. There is an aftermarket panel down here, which some of you eagle-eyed people will have spotted, and that has a warning lights on, and that is such a godsend in an older car because people just seem to not spot the red warning triangles. Now, coming back to the gearbox, before we start the car up, it's got 4 forward speed on this and reverse, and it is worth saying that there is synchro in every gear. If you have got into one of the Minxes, not a Super Minx, you probably know that it doesn't have synchro on first, or Kev's certainly doesn't, and his is, I think his is a 3C, so it's right kind of at that end point. Now anyway, I think I've probably chatted away to you quite enough. Let me get the car started up and you can have a little listen. Have a listen from the outside and then we'll take her out for a drive. Right, let's go on an adventure. And that brings us neatly up into 4th gear. Ready to drop back down into 3rd again for 30. Now look, 2 things. First of all, I realised in my excitement talking about the switches that I forgot to tell you what they actually were. So just running from left to right, you've got choke, you've got your blower, which is 2 speed, and you've got your lights, so side and headlights. I've just popped the lights on because we've taken this out for a bit of a dusky drive, and the light has faded a little bit faster than I thought it was going to. Now the second thing that I have to tell you about is this gearbox. Oh my goodness. This is one of the best gearboxes that I have ever driven on from the 1960s. The only way that I can describe it to you is like taking a searing hot knife and cutting it through fresh butter. The satisfaction, the lack of effort, oh, it is just so beautiful. But this is the thing about Roots Group cars, is you often take them out and you think they're pleasing on the eye and you think, yeah, they're a nice car. And then you drive them and you think, they're definitely a nice car. And I have never met somebody actually who is a Roots Group person who has ever just stopped at one. They always seem to go beyond. And it's only when you start to explore the range and you drive them yourself that you think, yes, I totally get why people keep buying into them. And for me, I think it's one of the biggest automotive crimes that we don't have Roots Group cars anymore. We don't have that quality because they are just exceptional. Now, we were talking about things like the suspension and all the steering and everything when we were walking around, but practicality wise, steering at low speeds is so much lighter than you would expect. You look at the size of this car, and again I was talking about sizes as we walk around, and you might think that it's going to be slightly cumbersome and you think, oh, it's not really for me. Not so. Taking it round at lower speeds and driving it, it's lighter than the Morris Minor. It's so beautifully responsive, it's smooth, and as we drive along these roads I'm able to put my foot down, it just catches that speed, and I think it's 0 to 60 in just over 21 seconds. So it's no speed demon, but it's certainly sprightly enough to keep up with everything else on the modern roads. And for John, who uses it to drive to work every day, he's not hammering down motorways, he's going through beautiful leafy villages and A roads. It's a perfect car really, and it takes corners nicely, there's no real roll to it. It's such a pleasing choice. Now I know that a lot of what it lost out to was based on price, but not everything in life should come down to cost. Sometimes there is that element of pleasure and lasting satisfaction. So for me, I would have rather, and I really rate some of those older Fords, but for me, I would have rather have saved up and got this. It's just everything that you want in a classic car. You've got loads of room around you because of course it's that 6-light design, and it means that you've got all that light coming through. It's so airy, it feels so modern. The dash layout is timeless. It's just a wonderful, wonderful car. Now I talk about the positioning of that indicator. Can you see there? So it's right up there if I need to indicate left, which I'm only doing, by the way, because nobody's behind me. And apart from that, I'm struggling to find something I don't like about it, which really does put it up in, I would say, my top 3 favourite vehicles that I've ever tested. It really is a toss-up between this and the Scepter as to which is my favourite car that I've ever driven. This is just everything. It's the seating position, which even as a short person, and bear in mind this is a family car, it's a car that's aimed at that upper middle bracket. It's really aimed at a male driver, and yet here I am, I'm able to pull that seat forward as far as I need it to be. I've got so much room around myself. The seats are really well upholstered, generously upholstered, I would say. They are lovely and wide. They hug your back in a really comforting way, which means that if somebody said to me now, you need to go and drive that 100 miles, I wouldn't even blink twice. It's great. It's just so much more modern and forgiving than I thought it would be. I wasn't really sure what to expect. I knew it'd be good because it's Roots Group, but my goodness, this has exceeded every expectation. So I guess all I can say is that if you ever see one of these for sale, and whether it's a project, whether it's a finished car, and you're trying to choose between this and maybe something from Ford, because Ford prices nowadays are mad, aren't they? They're so high. And you want a really attractive mid-60s car that has plenty of room for your luggage, because that boot was so generously sized, wasn't it? And you've got all the room in the front here, all the room in the back. There's plenty of leg room in the back for everybody. It's just the perfect choice. So whatever level you're buying in at, and no, these aren't the cheapest cars. Something like this is probably going to set you back 5 figures. But look at some of the other stuff that's out there in this bracket from the mid-60s. everything has shot up in price so much, and it's probably because it's attractive, it's usable, it's pleasing to drive, and it's just a joy. It's brought me so much joy driving this today, and it's brought me so much joy sharing it with you at home. I really hope you've enjoyed this, watching it, as much as I have driving it. I guess my last criticism is that John isn't letting me keep the car, because this is definitely, along with that Scepter, which I'm still trying to get hold of, the two cars that I would somehow move heaven and earth to bring home. I absolutely adore it. I'm in love. I see why John's in love, and I certainly see why this isn't his first Super Minx. Now that's it from me today. I hope wherever you are in the world, the weather is as lovely as it is here. But until next time, take care and drive safely.